So to start this talk, I'm going to have you guys all imagine that you are creating a modern web app now and what kind of tooling that you guys would be using. So first, you're probably thinking you need authentication of some sort, so you need to be able to authorize users so they can log in and log out, sign up. You need to have some place to store data, so we want to make sure that we have data that we can access from our front end. I think accessibility, a nice design is also extremely important once you're creating a web application, so that might be something you might want to consider. File storage. So file storage definitely is important, so that way we can have several different files in different places and we can retrieve them and have them presented in our application. And hosting. So where do we take our website and where do we host it? Does it support server-side rendering, static site generation? So all those things are extremely important. So what stack do we choose? And so there's a lot of choices. Who's here used some of these stacks? Who's used the LAMP stack? Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP back in the day. Who's used Mean, Mern, MongoDB? Definitely. Ken C. Dodds, if you guys know him, he just had his epic stack that he was talking about. He put a tweet about that. There's also T3. But one thing I want to show you guys today, and I think you should consider when creating your next application, is this one right here. I like to call this the Amplify stack. But really, when I say Amplify stack, this is AWS. This is AWS services, this is AWS things that you like already, like your Lambdas, like S3, AppSync, which is our managed GraphQL service. And then it has things like Amplify UI, which is our component library. So you can use your existing AWS services and use it with Amplify together. And of course, Amplify hosting as well. So we really build Amplify to make it easy for front-end developers to build full-stack apps using AWS services. So this is kind of the goal of our organization here at AWS Amplify, is to make it easy for not just front-end, but also mobile. So let's kind of take a look at what this stack could look like for your application today. For the build, for the back end, we can use a couple of different tools. Now, Michael Liendo earlier today mentioned about creating a stack using CDK. Who's heard of CDK here? Has anybody used CDK? A couple of hands. So that is a way to create your back end using code, but we're going to have a visual way of creating your back end. And so we can use something called Amplify Studio, which I'm going to show you a demo of. And we're going to use, we can also use the command line if we want, using Amplify CLI. So that way you don't have to write your infrastructure as code, that you can just use a couple simple commands to create it. And then we're going to look at your UI. So how do you create your UI nowadays? Is there ways we can shortcut the process of creating all the forms yourself, all the components yourself, but we can make an application that's accessible and we can make it reliable and scalable. And so we're going to look at Form Builder and UI components and Figma to code. And then we're going to look at libraries, how all these libraries, Amplify libraries, connect all these together with your AWS services. And underneath this all is our Amplify hosting. So we have Amplify hosting, which allows you to take your application, your static site generated or your server-side rendered app, and put it up online. So let's have a quick question of why should you use Amplify? So if you're already using AWS services, this is a perfect reason that you should consider Amplify. And you don't have to buy into the whole ecosystem. You can just do one, you can just use the library part of it, our front-end libraries, or you might want to create the whole stack on it. And you can also scale out of it and eject out of it if you needed. The price, AWS, I'm not trying to make this sound too salesy, but AWS services tend to decrease in price. And all the services I'm talking about today are on-demand services that are fairly inexpensive and actually mostly free to a certain amount. Like our Cognito, you can get up to 50,000 monthly active users without any additional cost. We believe when you use these tools together, any Apple users here? Probably some people have iPhones. It's nice when you're in the same ecosystem and things just work together, and that's how we provide our services together. So if you're using Amplify for the front end, it works with the back end. Our component library works with we have connected components, which I'll show you more about, and they'll connect together. And then we definitely have a dedicated team that handles this since 2017. So we've been building upon this ecosystem and these tools. But real quick, why not? If you don't use AWS at all, or you don't want to use it for a new project, it may not be right for you, and if there's a certain feature that we just don't support, it may not be right for you. So who am I? I've been talking for a few minutes. I'm a developer. You may have seen me. I do some YouTube and educational videos. I'm a developer advocate at AWS Amplify recently. I was a front-end engineer for many years before that. So let's take a look at the goals today. We have Amplify Studio, so I'm going to do some live demos for you guys. Now, I'm not going to live code like some other people. I have it pre-recorded, so I'm going to talk over the video. But we're going to look at Amplify Studio. I'm going to show you Form Builder. We're going to look at AppSync, which is the data modeling managed GraphQL service. And we're going to tie that all in with auth as well. So AWS Amplify Studio is a visual development environment for building full stack webs and mobile apps. So this allows you, rather than having to jump into the command line or write a bunch of infrastructure as code, you can now do this in a visual environment, which is really powerful. And just a quick shout out, if you've never used AWS before, you can use the free tier at aws.amazon.com/free. So let's take a look at how do we get started. So today we're going to create an Airbnb clone, and it's going to have just a simple admin interface. Let's assume that you want to add some new properties to a website, and you need to have some file storage. You want your data stored in a GraphQL service, and we need to be able to retrieve it from the front end. And we obviously going to have authentication. And I promise I won't hit this any longer, my mic. All right, so let's install it using the CLI. So we're going to do npm-i. You can use pnpm, whatever your favorite package manager is. And this is the command line interface, Amplify, that we'll have to use. Mostly everything will be visual, but you do have to install this tool. And then we're going to do configure CLI. We're just going to run amplify configure, and that'll connect your command line interface with the your AWS account. If anybody's used the AWS CLI, it's similar. And then I went ahead and so you guys don't have to watch me type a bunch of code, I created a Next 13 app in this cabins folder, and let's assume this is an app that has just a few things I'll talk about, and we need to install a couple libraries. One is the Amplify UI React library, and AWS Amplify as well, which is our JavaScript library. And the UI React library has everything we'll need. So let's think outside the command line for the rest of this presentation. Do you even use Hugo Vim? I don't know if anybody here gets this joke, but there is definitely some people that really enjoy the command line, like Vim users versus Emacs users. I'm a huge Vim fan, but I would still say, even if you love the command line to do everything, I love having a visual interface as well, and I can always jump down to the command line if I need to. So I'm going to start the Amplify Studio demo. All right. So this very fuzzy, can you guys see this? Here we go. So we're going to log in to the AWS console, and inside the console, I'm going to search for Amplify. I'm going to choose AWS Amplify. I'm going to click Get Started, and then in Amplify Studio, I'm going to click Get Started here. And this is going to ask me for an app name. So I'm just going to add a fictitious name. I'm going to call it Studio App. And this will build all the infrastructure in the back end that we need. And then we'll click Launch Studio, and this is essentially Studio that I've been talking about. You'll see in the left-hand side, there's ways we can add data, authentication, storage, functions, GraphQL. So let's do a couple of those things and see how it works. So let's start with auth. All right, so in my application here, once again, it's a little fuzzy, this video. Essentially what I'm doing right now is I'm clicking the login button. Well, let me see if I can get it to come up a little less fuzzy. Let's see here. Oh, I think there it goes. Let's see here if I can get this working again. Sorry, guys. Okay, that looks a little nicer. Let me present it. Enter full screen mode. Okay. And I'll start it here. Okay, so I'm going to click on authentication on the side here. And this allows us to add our Cognito application here. We can have our default login be email, but we can add in federated login through like Facebook, Google, or Amazon if needed. We can also change a different login. We now can add in different attributes. So if you need users to sign in when they sign up to have like their name or address, we can do that. We can change password protection settings and the length in characters for your application. And then we're going to confirm deployment. And so this will go ahead and deploy a user pool, an identity pool to Amazon and to our app here. And now we can pull it into our application. So we're going to just run this Amplify pull command. This is going to pull it into our app. We're going to verify that this is us. And then you can see here, it's going to ask us a few questions. Because this, well, what it'll do is it'll ask us a few questions the first time. We'll just say we're using a React app. We'll hit enter through a few of these things. And it'll basically create a few directories and configure our application for us. And if we run Amplify status, that's that CLI command we created earlier, we can see our app is running. Now, this is the UI doc site. So just real quickly, if we go into the authenticator, this is what we're going to be adding to our application. It's just going to be a few lines of code. And then we're going to use the UI components library. And so the way the library works, it has buttons, checkboxes, password fields, phone numbers, anything that we want, we can add to our application. So here's the Next 13 app. I did a little bit of coding beforehand, so that way you guys didn't have to watch me code all these. But there's this new Amplify folder. In this Amplify folder, I have this backend. And this is where the CloudFormation scripts, everything auto-generated for us. Now these components here I created beforehand, just so we'll have them in here. There's like a header, a layout, a logo. This is all using the Amplify UI components library. You can see here one called Flex, heading, rating. So this is the most one that will be most important. This is the property card. This is what's going to look. This is what's going to show the card, the image, and everything else. So we'll need to do a little setup here in our app TSX file. We're going to import in our Amplify from AWS Amplify. So this is how we do the configuration of our Amplify app. And we're going to import in the AWS exports file from source. And this was created once we did that Amplify pull earlier. And we're going to run these Amplify configure, and then we're going to pass in that AWS exports. And just because we are using the authenticator, I'm going to surround the whole application by the authenticator provider. And this will allow us to use the authenticator throughout the application. And from here, let's add the code in to add in this authenticator. So in our login, this is one of our routes called login. We'll go ahead and add that in. So from here, I'm going to import in use router. And one thing I want to make sure is that if a user is already logged in and they go to the login route, that it redirects them back over to the admin console, which only allows users that are logged in. So I'm going to use this use authenticator hook, and we're going to grab the route out of it. I'm going to check to see if a user is authenticated, and if they are, I'm going to push them to the admin route. And then just these 3 lines here, this authenticator is just all we need to add in all the logic for login, log out, and everything else. So I'm going to click sign in here, and I'm going to click create account. I'm going to have this email, which I'm going to do my kind of test email account here. I'm going to put a password, confirm password, And on my other screen, I'm going to grab some code. I'm going to enter it into this confirmation code box. Confirm. And here it is. So we have now logged into our application. And the next part, we're going to look at GraphQL. So we're going to look at our manage AppSync, our managed GraphQL service. And once again, it's a little fuzzy. Sometimes I have to, there we go. All right, so let's go back. Okay, so from here we click on data, and then from data we're going to click add model. So this is a way we can create our whole data schema. So if you have multiple tables, you'll add it all through here. So we're going to create one called house, and then in house we're going to use a name. Let's assume that's like the description or the title of the app. We're going to use a thumbnail, which is going to be the name of the picture we're going to use for it. We're going to add beds, rate, which is going to be how much it is, and then a rating, which is out of 5-star. From here, you can also add in all your authorization rules. So maybe you want this API only to have logged in users to be able to update or delete, and public users can read. So we just make some check marks there. And then we can also change the different type of scalar types. We can add integers. And then we're going to click deploy. And that's going to deploy this to the back end. And a nice feature of this Amplify Studio is that we have this content tab. So we can go in and look at the data that's in the table that we just created. So we have this house table that we just created, or GraphQL schema. We can now auto-generate some dummy data for us. So we're going to create 3 different dummy data here. It just automatically generated this. I'm going to change the rating real quickly to show that it's out of 5 stars, so I'm going to put 2 stars here. I'm going to put 1 star. Obviously, this is just nonsense data because we wouldn't have like 16 beds in one house. We might, maybe you would. So after all this is done, we can go into our, we can pull it back into our app again. So we'll run Amplify pull, and this is going to pull the information back in. By the way, I did speed up some of this, so you didn't have to watch all that. And this is in our properties index TSX. So this is the main entry point of the application. So we want to show all those houses in this. So we're going to use a use effect. We're going to pull in that property card I showed you earlier. And then we're going to use something called data store, which is Amplify's way of grabbing data from our managed GraphQL AppSync backend. So we're just going to, in a very simple use effect hook here, very straightforward that is, we're going to use the datastore.query. This house is actually auto-generated for us. It's kind of model data, so we don't have to do that ourselves. And then we're using a use state hook to add the data to this cabins that we need. Then we're going to use one of Amplify's collection components. This allows us to iterate through a collection of an array of items. So we have this cabins object that has all the data from our GraphQL managed AppSync backend. You can see this is the syntax here, and we can pass in all this information from the items into the property card. And just real quick, we have a whole theming system available too. So for Amplify Studio, we can theme your whole application. I'm going to import in this theme and a theme provider, and we'll just surround the whole app by this theme provider, and then we'll pass in a theme into the theme provider, and we'll save it there, and we'll go back to our theme, and you can see here this has a whole bunch of information about all our different colors. We can configure all the different components, the out-of-the-box components from Amplify UI component. So here what it looks like now, this has the dummy data, but obviously we want to get it to have real data. So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip forward. So the last thing I want to show you, well, we'll show you in a sec with Storage Manager. And Storage Manager is a way you can set up your S3 buckets to put all your files in one place. So you just go click on the Storage tab. You can set up what type of auth rules. By the way, if you guys have used AWS in the past, you might have created IAM rules. We do that all for you, so you don't have to worry about security. And now we basically created an S3 bucket. If we click on this File Browser tab, we can see all the file, it automatically creates these folders, but we can go in and if any file gets uploaded, we can delete it, copy it to, move it. So I'm going to pull that once again into our app, which will take a second. And this will, once again, it will generate everything. We have a new storage category. And I just needed to make a couple changes to a couple files. So inside this storage, inside this app right here, this is the admin. Once you logged in, you go into this admin route. I'm just going to add this storage manager, which has the access level public, so anybody can upload files to it. And so this is what we call a connected component. So here it is. This is what it looks like. It was just 4 lines of code, and it's automatically connected to our S3 bucket that we just created. And I can click on it. I'll just click on a file to upload it. It automatically uploads. And so we're almost there. One thing we can do too, we can go back to that file browser. If we refresh it here, we see the file that we just uploaded. And we can edit it or delete it or do whatever we want with it. So we're almost out of time, but maybe we can show real quick. In our UI library here, this is our form builder. So our form builder is a way that kind of connects this together. So instead of having to create all the forms yourself, all these inputs are already connected to our GraphQL AppSync backend, meaning that when we submit this, it'll just submit it to that data store that we just created. And so I'm going to go in here and just make some slight tweaks to it. I can rename these input fields. I can make changes to whatever I need here. This button, I'm going to just remove it so the reset button doesn't show. And I can also then pull it back into our app. And that will pull it in. And then inside here, what I can do is I have this house create form, which now if you look inside our application and look inside the source folder, there's a new UI component. So all these components, these forms were created for us after we did that pull. And now we can just use it directly inside our application. So we'll come back down here in step 2, and we'll add in the house create form. Once again, it's just 3 lines of code, essentially. We can do a lot of customization of this, but we're just going to do on success. So once it creates, it pushes it to the main route. And then I'm going to go in here and delete all these files here, just so we don't have them when we do our test. So let's see if we can, one quick file we have to do is make sure that once we go and we show this form that we grab the image directly from S3. So we're going to use this storage.get command, and we're going to set the S3 photo. And this will grab the information for us. So if we real quickly try it here, last minute. We're going to say nice cabin in the woods. Now, before you saw I uploaded that 1.jpg, so I'm going to refer to that 1.jpg, put a nice photo of cabins. I'm going to put the number of beds, the rate, which will be, let's say, $350, a rating out of 1 out of 5 stars. We'll do 4 stars. Cool. So there it is. It's working. A lot of this is auto-generated for us, but we can always change it. And for the sake of time, I won't show you the next one, but we can certainly do more. And by the way, just recently we added it in so you don't have the storage manager, which that file uploader will be directly in the forms directly. And real quick, we have a Figma to code plugin too, but I just want to say thank you guys, everything. Thank you for coming. Thank you for learning, and I'll be available to answer any questions later. Thanks.